Welcome to the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. I'm your host, Jacob Cooper, best-selling author of Life After Breath and the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. For those of you who are new to my podcast, please consider hitting that subscribe button, sharing your comments down below in the comments section, as well as following us on the mindbodyspirit.fm for the audio syndicated version of this podcast. And you could even download the mindbodyspirit.fm app on your phones. Today's guest is a very special guest and a new friend of mine. His name is Kevin Todeschi. Kevin's written over 25 books on all things Edgar Cayce, who you're going to learn a lot about during this conversation. And Kevin has also served in big time positions, formerly with the A.R.E, the Association of Research and Enlightenment. He's spoken pretty much throughout every continent on the planet on all things Cayce. And so he's a big student and teacher of the works of Edgar Cayce, and he's just going to give over just a wonderful conversation to really introduce someone who's near and dear to my heart, Edgar Cayce, as well as Kevin too. He's a wonderful man you'll find and just a brilliant source of all things spirituality and all things Cayce. So without further ado, we bring on Kevin Tedeschi on the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Kevin Tedeschi, thank you so much for coming here on the Wisdom Jacob's Ladder. It's so good to see you again.
Jacob, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we connected for the first time in person, although we probably connected in other lifetimes, I would imagine. This past May at the Souls in Transit conference at the A.R.E. And, we went out to dinner, but I absolutely was blown away by the talk that you gave on Edgar Cayce and the references of reincarnation in the Bible. What stood out to me was just the passion and the emotion and just how competent you were with all things Cayce in the Bible. I was just in awe. So I said right then and there, I got to get you on the podcast, and here we are, in August, and it's all happening.
Well, thank you. Thanks for being at that talk, and thanks for having me on the program. Truly, the Casey material has been the strongest motivating influence in my life for more than 50 years.
Yeah, I've seen that you've written, correct me if I'm wrong, 25 books, revolving Casey. Is that about correct? Accurate?
Well, I usually say more than 25, but yeah, that's about right.
Wow, so I'm selling you short. I only got 2, so I got a long way to go. But, not to, reference too much Jacob from the Bible and Genesis, but with every one of our guests, we try to get to the genesis of their why and their how, and I'm kinda curious, Kevin, how did you, what drew you to Casey? How did it all begin, for yourself?
Well, I'll encapsulate the whole story, but let me just say that I grew up in a very, very, I'll have to say very 3 times, very conservative uh, spiritual family. My father was extremely conservative, and I was raised to believe that God knew everything, and you had to go to church every Sunday. The only reason for not going was death, their own, and it was a really structured. God is a transactional God. You have to do this in order to get God's love. And eventually, when I was about 14 or 15, I really had a hard time with something that had come to my awareness. And that was I was taught that God knows everything. And I was taught that your only purpose here was to get to heaven by your deeds and your faith and whatever you did. And finally, one morning, the idea hit me, well, if God knows everything, God already knows what I'm going to choose to do. So why am I here? Doesn't make any sense. I mean, why doesn't he just send me to heaven or hell to begin with? Because he already knows everything. And when I phrased that question to my folks, it was not met with, oh boy, you're really thinking outside the box. It was, oh my God, what's wrong with you? But that really kind of stuck with me and made me depressed for a couple of
Mm,
years. And then I was sent to boys' state in the 11th grade. It's a
mm,
boys' state, used to be a lot more popular. It's put on by American Legion. Basically, it's high school teachers recommend young men and young women. There's also a girls' state who might be good in the government or leadership. So I went off to boys' state, and it's a week-long program. And by Tuesday, I was bored out of my mind. I thought, my God, the last thing I want to do is go into government. This was 1975. I went down to the student bookstore at Colorado State University, and the book that jumped out at me was a book called A Prophet in His Own Country, The Story of the Young Edgar Cayce, and that was
Mm.
the second book that Jess Stern had written about Mr. Cayce, and I got that book, and I finished reading it by the time folks came and picked me up the end of the week, and as soon as I got in the car, I said, and this is an exact quote, "I'm supposed to move to Virginia Beach, and I'm supposed to be president of A.R.E." And my father thought I had lost my mind. And so for the next couple of years, once a month, he'd take me to priests to kind of talk me out of this. And I got really good at talking about the Casey material. And then finally, one priest told my father, I don't see any contradiction between Catholicism and reincarnation. Well, he was a priest, and my father couldn't talk back to him in his own mind, but he was so irritated, I never had to see another priest again. And that's really how it really started. I finished college. I had a background in finance and accounting, so eventually I moved to Virginia Beach and got started working in the accounting department.
Wow, what a remarkable hit of intuition that you're able to get by just picking up that book, which I guess, and you could probably speak more to this, was the thing with the books in case he was sleeping on the books and he would know the material. I don't know if that's a myth, but you kind of had that too, where you just picked up the book and you knew things about yourself from just that book. It's remarkable. And 25 books later, or even more than that, you're still doing it. Yeah.
I'm still doing it. And like you say, Casey had the ability when he was young to sleep on a school book and memorize its contents. When I first read that, I tried that 3 or 4 times, and all I ever got was a pain in the neck. It didn't really help at all. But he had a talent that really surpasses any that I've ever.
Wow. Well, for yourself, what really drew you from that book to Casey? What was it? Because I know you mentioned that it seemed like you were struggling in your adolescent years with, some of the faith of or the depiction of God that you were taught, and it just didn't resonate. So from picking up that book, in this library, what like jumped out or stood out to you that
Well,
said,
I think the thing that
wow, this
pro-
is
the thing that
really
probably
right.
got me at
This
first
feels
was,
right.
yeah, the thing that got me at first was I think that the concept that God was an all-loving God, that you didn't have to be of any one religion, that God loved us all regardless of who we were, and that our goal here was to somehow, and these words probably didn't come to me at the time. They're my mature mind thinking about what wowed me. That our purpose here is to somehow bring spirit into the earth. That's why we're here, and
Mm,
our goal is to help bring transform this planet. When I was CEO of the Casey organization for 15 years, I used to tell the staff over and over again, we are employees for God. And I didn't just mean the A.R.E. staff, I mean the entire world. Our job is to somehow bring divinity in the earth. That's why we're here. Why do I say that? Because how do you think God in spirit touches things physical? And it's really through us. And we all have that job somehow to help transform the planet through our lives, through our interactions with other
mhm,
people. And even though we all have that job, most of us don't know we have that job. And even those of us that do, most of us are only working part time. So I think that we really need Renaissance revival of understanding what spirituality is all about, our part in it, and how, as we transform ourselves, we transform the world around us. And I think all that truly empowered and engaged me in what's been a lifelong pursuit.
mm, mm. So, you would say, in other words, it was very much personal and empowering that you felt that you could make a change and a difference versus putting that power maybe outside of you or in somebody else, that you could be in other words, spirituality is a participant sport in a way. It just allowed people to not be in the stands, but you felt Casey's teachings allowed you to be on the field more. Is that kind of it?
That's it exactly, and it's not just, I mean, sometimes you come across philosophical materials that are helpful in your own understanding, but Casey materials actually even goes beyond that. It's hands-on practical things you can try that really work, and one of the early ones was, I joined when I was still, going to college and still in Colorado. I joined the Edgar Cayce study group, which basically they're spiritual discussion groups where you're with people from all kinds of religions, and you learn about Cayce's, understanding of working with spirit, and this group was really, amazing for me at least. They were a lot older than me. Most of them were 15, 20, 25 years older than me, and they would do unique things, like every 6 months, they'd come together as we met weekly, but they'd have this exercise where they decided, okay, we're going to dream on a topic and see if we can get an answer, and then we'll come back and discuss it as a group. And the topic, I've told the story all over the world. The topic that the group decided to work on was, what do I personally need to work on spiritually? And the idea was, you're going to write out that question, read it before you went to bed, and then dream on it as much as you could, and then come back the next week and discuss what you got and see if the group could help understand. And I was a little nervous because I didn't remember my dreams. And part of me thought, well, I'm going to be the only one in this group of 14 or 15 that doesn't have a dream, and I'm going to look really stupid. But I really tried. I wrote down my question. I read it that night. The next day I woke up, I remembered nothing. So my performance anxiety went up a little bit. So the next night I wrote it over and over and over again on a piece of paper. And I folded up one piece of paper, tucked it in my undershorts to have it with me all night. And this is the dream I had. I dreamed I was in Egypt, and I had never been to Egypt before.
Mm.
And I was on an A.R.E tour to Egypt. I've actually been on A.R.E tours since then all over the world, including Egypt 6 times. But I had never been. I'm with a group of 50 people. I'm coming out of the Great Pyramid. Anybody who's been there up maybe a third of the way up, there's a big hole in the side of the pyramid. You can walk out and look down below. And I walked out of this hole, and the Giza Plateau was right before me. And as soon as I step out, somebody in the A.R.E tour group said really loud, by the way, Jesus taught Kevin some dance steps, and Kevin wants to show them to you now. And I was kind of taken by surprise because I never remembered meeting Jesus and I didn't know anything about dancing. But this group of people started to gather around me, and excuse the language, but somebody I didn't really care for in ARE sat down to watch. And I heard myself think, excuse the language, what an ass, as this person sat down. And as soon as I thought that, I looked out of the Giza Plateau, and Jesus was standing there. And he thought back what I had just thought, and his next thought was, more than anything else, you need to work on your thoughts. And when I woke up, I was blown away. I had written out, what do I need to work on spiritually? And from the big guy himself, I got work on your thoughts. Well, from that, I became really engaged in dreams. And in fact, over the years, I've spoken on 6 continents about dreams. I've written 3 different dream books. I've discovered eventually through some past life experiences. I used to be a dream recall interpret a dream interpreter in past lives. And so it's been just an amazing experience. And it's just not about dreams. It's about health. It's about working with meditation. It's about transforming negative relationships. Anything you can think of, the Cayce material can be really positive in transforming your own consciousness.
Wow. Wow. That what a story. And I'm curious for people who really want to work with their dreams or recall them or find ways for their dreams to speak to them. What kind of from your work would you recommend for people to really maximize the dreams that they have so that it's just not something that you wake up and it goes away, but rather, like yourself, you were able to have this practical change in your life to change your thoughts, change your reality in some ways. Very kind of loose Louis Hay kind of stuff, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
I would say part of the issue for many of us in the United States, at least, is we are not culturally predisposed to work with our dreams. I mean, for most of us, we woke up and our parents never said, "Hey, what'd you dream last night?"
Mhm,
So part of it is just changing the way you work with dreams, and
mhm,
part of doing that is to, when you wake up every morning, have a notepad or something by your bed,
mhm,
and just start writing down whatever you remember. The worst thing people can do is try to think of the dream. What was that dream? And try to think of the whole thing and then write it down. No, just start writing whatever comes to mind and remember it while you're on with your paper. Because as soon as your left brain kicks in terms of what was that about, your right brain will kick out. So
mhm,
just start recording your dreams. That's the first thing you can do. Another thing is, I think we get engaged if we have an issue or a problem, or for example, let's say you're having a problem with someone at work. If you write out the question, "What is the energy surrounding my relationship with so and so?" I like questions with energy. Now, what is the
mhm,
energy surrounding my relationship? And just dream on that for a few nights. You can get some real insights. And if that still doesn't work for you, pick a friend, a partner, a spouse, one of your kids, and have them write out a question, and you write out a question, and trade questions, and see if you can help have a dream for the other person. When you do that, you actually have a dream for both of you, but that sometimes engages us more if we are trying to help somebody else. So it's
mhm.
just a matter of practice, trying to do it yourself, and just get comfortable with it, and I have used that over and over and over again, and it's just
Mm.
amazing.
And the intentionality too, and being very specific with, what you're trying to find and being very direct seems to be effective too.
Absolutely.
I mean, regarding dreams, do you just feel all this information is always around us? It's just that we're able to get more into a relaxed state so that we're receptive to it? Do you think it's kind of like a neuro kind of thing where our brain's in that brainwave state, hopefully, when we sleep, and then we're just more accessible to this stuff?
Absolutely, in terms of we have a lot more information available to us at that level. But in addition to that, if you can imagine, this is science now, what I'm about to say, not Casey. Science has proven that of all the information coming to you, all the data, all the stimulus, the conscious mind filters out approximately 97%. Now, it's things like you don't feel the chair on the bottom of your seat, or in your case, the earphones on your ear, or in my case, my glasses on my nose, or the sound of that air conditioning heating system, unless I point it out to myself, because otherwise you would be on constant sensory overload, all this data coming to you. And so it gets set aside. The mind says that's irrelevant and it gets set aside, but it is set aside in your subconscious mind. And so when you sleep, your subconscious mind comes awake. And so all the information you kind of glanced at, picked up on during the day, it comes to the forefront. And that's why if someone's at a crime scene and they're hypnotized, they remember more under hypnosis than they're aware of consciously, because that
Mhm,
part of our mind stores all that data and it can come forward again. But in addition to that, Casey would say there's a deeper connection of our mind that he called the superconscious, that has for lack of a better word, a connection, an Ethernet connection to the Akashic Records. So
mhm,
anything that's going on anywhere in the universe, we can pick up on, and especially if it has relevance for us and it comes to our consciousness while we sleep.
mm. Wow. Yeah, and it's a beautiful segue to those who are maybe newer to Casey. Correct me if I'm wrong, he was really able to, I would say, expand his connection through self-induced hypnosis. Is that, correct, you would say?
Cor- Correct. Early on, especially, he found that he could put himself to sleep, and while in that state, tune into all kinds of other reality, other thoughts, other information, people's past lives. As he grew older, he became much more waking in the psychic state as well. That
Mhm,
he could pick up on people's past lives, their impressions, whether they just been in a fight or whatever, just by seeing them. And so the more we work with things like intuition, I actually give a program I'm going to do in Lilydale this month, end of this month, that shows people how at practice with intuition, you can continue to pick up on anything.
mhm,
Uh, and obviously, the best use of intuition is how to help another person or how to help yourself in an issue. But intuition is just one of our God-given birthrights.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, certainly Casey was in many ways a historic figure, and the works that he, did is still innovative today. But from your understanding, people could do kind of similar, stuff in their own way. Like they don't like it doesn't require someone who's particularly special to connect. Like you would say, we all have the ability to get into that deeper state and open ourselves up to the
Right.
field.
And I had someone write my website the other day wanting to know how they could put themselves like Casey to sleep like Casey to get information. I, I think we all have our own way of doing it. You don't have to go to sleep in order to pick up intuitive information.
Hmm.
Uh, One of the things I'm fond of is if you have, let's say you have a question like, uh, should I apply for this new job? That's just what just came to mind. What is the energy surrounding this new job? And you kind of like where you're at and you don't want to, upset the cart, but this job seems kind of interesting. So what I would do is I would write up the name of that job on like an index card, and then the name of your current job on an index card, and then a decoy of some kind, maybe an upcoming movie that you want to see. Write the name of that and turn the three index cards upside down and mix them up, and then put your hand on a card one at a time and just say, "Imagine a place."
Hmm.
And as you imagine a place, how do you feel about it? What's going on there? And write down, and then do move to the next card and then move to the final card. And at the end of that, you would be surprised at how you can pick up on the energy of each of the things you're thinking of when you have no idea what you're trying to do. It's an
Hmm.
amazing use of the intuition.
It's a muscle, right?
Yeah, it's
It's
a
like that
muscle. The more you use
biceps
it, yeah, the more you use it.
Yeah.
And, sometimes people think I'm crazy, but I try to do something with intuition every day. We have a post office box, and you know how you have the little lock on the outside and you open it up? I go to the post office box and I imagine my mind's going inside that post office box and I try to count how many pieces of mail are in there. And then I open it and see how close I was. So it's a just ongoing practice.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Regarding Casey, and certainly they do a lot of studies on a lot of different intuitives or mediums, and a lot of parapsychology departments, universities do this. And what they find is, I guess, a dichotomy of someone who practiced and someone who's rather evidential as a medium or as an intuitive is that they're able to access a lot quicker, their ability to go from the first or second brainwave to getting into those theta or alpha brainwaves a lot easier.
Yep.
Was that the case with Casey that he needed like early on to just relax for a bit to get into because most, intuitives or mediums are walking kind of in their own awakened trance state when they're connecting. So I'm wondering for Casey's standpoint, why early on, I guess, did he need to do that? Was that something from another lifetime? Was that a gift that why exactly did he need to
Go
go
to
into
sleep.
trance? Yeah.
Well, this is like a whole nother series of lectures where we could give a whole lecture on Edgar Cayce's past lives,
Mm,
but I'll give you two of them. According to Casey, he was for lack of a better word, a desert nomad in ancient Persia.
mm,
He was nearly killed in battle and he was laying on the desert sands. He had a near death experience.
mm,
During that experience, he saw his mind traveling and he could go anywhere and see anything. When he came back into the body, he still had that capacity, and that talent carried with it through his remainder of his lives. However, in his lifetime just prior to Edgar Cayce, he had been what he called a ne'er-do-well in the Old West, named John Bainbridge, who had been extremely psychic, and he had used his psychic ability to pick up women and to gamble. And for whatever reason, the universe looked poorly on that. So he said, in this time when he came around, he had to quote unquote set self aside
mm,
in order to do his intuitive work, and that's why he went to sleep. We don't lose our talents. We take our talents with us. We take our biases, we take
mm,
our fault finding, our animosities, but we also take our musical talents, our compassion. We're just like an ongoing work in progress. And that's really why Casey had to put himself to sleep. That said, his psychic ability worked best
mm,
when someone really needed his help. So, for example, a mother who was really worried about a sick child would get a much better caliber of reading than a businessman who was looking for gold in Texas,
mm,
because the intent of the person getting the reading had an impact upon Casey's ability to tune into it.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I think, well, for him, I guess he understood intuition much like mindfulness, like, you could be mindful and you could rob a bank, but it's not rooted in the right principles of compassion, of empathy. Intuition, same thing. It seems like it was misused in that last lifetime, and it seemed like he was able to certainly understand the real purpose of it, and it really went on to new levels when the intentionality was rooted in the right places.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and one of the things I try to do is, there's been many mornings where I wake up and I think, God, what would you have me do today? And just have a sense of what it is you're supposed to be about. And the more you can do that, I think you can have some really uh, amazing experiences with coming across people that need your help and just having a sense of what you can do to assist them. I never say, hey, I just had a psychic experience that I'm supposed to do whatever. I just do it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing through acts of service how our gifts could really take on new echelons and,
Yeah.
it's amazing. But I caught something that you discussed that, because I do a lot of past life regression work, that it seems that intuition, much like anything else, is a gift that just for a lot of people doesn't start in this lifetime. It's something that a lot of people are able to carry over and build
Yeah.
throughout lifetimes.
That we just take our talents with us, like luggage.
Yeah. Regarding Casey, what are some things that he's and I'm sure you've written plenty of books in this, but things that he's been able to pick up on that really just blow your doors off. They're like, "Oh my god," either like predictions or things that he's kind of said in his channeled readings that
Sure.
really blew you away.
Well, I th I would say there's been things over and over and over again that just amaze me even after decades finding new materials, which I'll end with that one. But one of the I mean, he was saying things, oftentimes that were science fiction. Like, early on, he talked about the fact that how eventually you could diagnose any illness from a drop of blood. I mean, that's
Mm,
near near true right now. At the time, it was science fiction. He said at one time when he was giving a lot of readings on the ancient Jews in Israel, that there was a group called the Essenes. The word Essenes not in the Bible. It was a small Jewish sect that only scholars knew about. They believed it was a monastic set, mostly all men. Casey said there were men and women in the community. Women were treated as equals. He gave a great deal of readings on this whole sect. Casey died in 1945. In 1948, they started doing excavations at Qumran and found that in the cemetery there were men and women bones. So
mm,
that was something he didn't have any idea about, came to be true. Another one was he was talking about ancient Africa, and he talked on three different occasions about how the Nile, which actually flows from the south to the north, eventually, at one point, flowed to the west and emptied into the Atlantic Ocean.
mm,
Well, that was science fiction. Then the Skylab imaging system was taking uh, photographs of all the different continents, and they discovered that the Nile had changed its course and at
mm.
one point had emptied into the Atlantic Ocean. So over and over and over again, things that Casey said that seemed far fetched came to be true. In my own life, even though I've been involved, it's actually 50 years ago in this last June, I still find new stuff. And maybe about 9 years ago, one of the things that really caught my eye was I had read one reading that talked about time being an illusion. And I thought that was interesting. So I started looking at it, and there's more than 100 of them. And then the more I got into it, and I started looking into this idea of time slips. Time slips are there are people, there are crazy people, and there are people who make things up, but there is also people who have real, uh, stories of having been experienced out of time. I've actually had one myself eventually. And so I've done a whole program now on the illusion of time. No matter what the subject is, you can find it in the Casey material. The Casey material is 25 million words. And so you could spend a lifetime exploring some of the things that people just like you and I asked about almost 100 years ago.
Wow. It's just funny. I'm smiling because I just had a conversation with a relative last night about the illusion of time.
Mhm.
And that's, Casey's work was he was very much connected to the Akashic Records, but like you said, it's a buffet of any question that you want, it's there. It was like the internet before the internet, this stuff, it's like you Google anything, it's right there. And like as you said, almost 100 years ago, he crossed over, but his work is still like, we're still trying to make sense of it. It's still far ahead of its time. It's amazing.
It is amazing, and I mean, there's practical things like when I was growing up, when I was still in high school, I had horrible allergies, and, the, allergist told my mother that I was allergic to every tree, bush, and shrub that grew in the state of Colorado. So I would get 6 shots a week, 3 one day and 3 another, for allergies, and I looked into the Casey information, and he provided a simple remedy. It's actually still sold on Amazon as a mouthwash and gargle. It's called glycothymoline, Glycothymoline. It's about $15 a bottle. Glycothymoline, to take about a tablespoon of glycothymoline and a half a glass of water. And he claimed it would alkaline your system instantly, almost instantly, and you would have a repel against allergies. I started doing that and I no longer have allergies. I don't even take pills anymore.
Wow.
And I have told many, many people, most recently, the guy that works at the post office, I would see him blowing his nose all the time. And I said, "Do you have allergies?" "Yes." So I wrote out glycothylamine, where to get it, what to do. And he told me, for the first time in my life, I have a relief. So there are things in the Casey material that are so easy to work with and really prove, this works. And, people have to think, well, if Casey's true about this, maybe he's true about that. And it's just an amazing uh, encyclopedia of all kinds of data and information that you can apply in your own life.
Yeah. And you have, top-tier doctors schwitzing in the top medical schools and stuff like that, but this is a man, from my understanding, who had no medical training background, and he worked as, like, a consultant with some of these doctors, and you're
Yeah.
living proof that, like, his stuff works. It was able to really help out your allergies, so
Yeah.
remarkable. That's
About
remarkable.
9,000 of the Casey readings are on health, and what the I mean, his secretary was Gladys Davis, who he hired when she was 18, and she worked there until 1986. So I actually knew her for a number of years, worked with her for
Mm,
4 when I was on staff. She
mm,
kept track of everything, and what they found is that, let's say Casey gave readings to 400 different people on arthritis. You can go to the Edgar Cayce site, edgarcayce.org, and you can look up the health database, and they've compiled, what are the top 12 or 14 things Casey told these 400 people to do for arthritis, and that information still works today.
Wow, remarkable, and it's so good because I think in the new age community, there seems to be a lot of people who gloss over mental health and physical health, and they just kind of are very evasive of those things, but
Mhm.
Casey leaned into, just all those things very thoroughly. For people
Absolutely.
listening, like, what are some of the top takeaways that you've gotten from Casey when it pertains to taking care of our health, why it's important, and maybe some practical steps? Because would you say taking care of the physical health is a part of the spiritual health too from Casey?
Well, absolutely. I mean, part of the reason is because, we're not physical bodies who happen to have souls. We're spiritual beings driving around in a physical body. So I'm driving around in a 1958 Kevin Todeschi. If you don't have a good physical body to drive around in, it's a lot harder to do what it is you actually can be about. In fact, there's lots of times people who have a real pain or they have a psychological issue right now, they have no interest in dealing with things of the spirit until you address the physical and the mental. I think that there's lots of things that you can do for your health. There was a doctor named Dr. Riley, Harold J. Riley, who came up with the acronym CARE, CARE, as an overview of everything Casey said was important for your health. And CARE stands for circulation. You got to get your circulation going. And whether you do that through easy exercise like walking or more induced exercise, swimming, whatever it might be. I love my elliptical. You
Yeah.
have to get your circulation going, which you can also do through massage.
Mhm,
Assimilation, you have to have a focus on some of the foods you're taking into your system. Casey
mhm,
recommended a diet that was more alkaline producing than acid producing. So, for
mhm.
example, if you're on the verge of catching a cold, the last thing you want to do is eat candy or sweets because that's going to put you right over into being a culture medium for a germ. So, assimilation is important. Relaxation, we have to get enough rest.
Mhm.
We have to, you can also get relaxation from meditation. I mean, and from massage. I love to get a massage about every six
Mm.
weeks. And then elimination. You have to make sure that you're having proper eliminations, or you can hold on to toxins. But
Mhm.
that coin word care really sums up Casey's overall approach to maintaining your wellness.
Mm.
And it's something all of us can work with to some extent or another.
Oh, and it's so on par with modern day neuroscience. I follow the works of a man by the name of Dr. Daniel Amen. I'm sure you've heard
Mhm.
of him. He's been in all the major programs, but he really studies the brain. And he speaks about how brain health is mental health. And he speaks about how, much like Casey talked about, the more blood flow that you're getting in your brain, depression goes down, anxiety goes down, sleep improves. So he really emphasized blood flow so much through walking and exercise. And Casey was right in cue with the neuroscience of today. So amazing. Yeah.
Exactly. And another practical thing Casey talked about is the importance of transforming our relationships. That the people around us are there for a reason, and the reason is not because the universe is ticked off at us or someone's trying to punish us. Is there's something there for us to learn.
Mhm,
And one of the things that Casey suggested is that whenever we have an emotional response to another human being, a negative emotional response,
mhm,
we're seeing an aspect of ourselves that we need to work on.
mm,
And I really had a hard time with that one. And then I kind of had this thought come to mind that even my own worst enemy has a best friend. And even my own best friend has people who don't like them. Why? And we're all predisposed to see something in other people that's specific to our own needs. So I remember when I was still in college and I was working part-time at a accounting department, there was this woman who I call Mrs. X when I talk about her, and we had the same exact job. She was about 30 years older than I. We were doing accounting for the accounting firm, and a lot of people in accounting at the time used to smoke. I didn't smoke, so I had a book with me to read during the smoke break, and I usually had Casey books with me, and I'd bring a Casey book in over and over again. Our desk was right next to each other, and one day I'd had a book like Edgar Cayce on Reincarnation or Edgar Cayce on something, and she asked the question, "Kevin, do you ever read any nonfiction?" I mean, that was the kind of that was the
Right.
kind of relationship we had. So the more I was around this person, the more I really didn't like her. And then
Mhm,
one day I'm at home meditating, and the thought came to me, it's so much easier to be spiritual alone at home with your door closed than
mhm,
it is when you're out with people who are challenging you. So I
mhm,
decided to work on that relationship. And Casey's suggestion is that whenever you have a person you want to transform your relationship, you need to start giving them the same kind of relationship you would like to have in return, because like
mm,
attracts like. And so I thought, well, maybe the best I could do with her is we could be friends. And so, we got to the point where we hadn't even said good morning to each other when we got to work. So I go out my way to
mhm,
say good morning.
mm,
And I remember the first couple of times she looked at me real suspiciously, like, "What's he got planned?" And I started working on this, and then when she'd start to talk, I'd stop to listen. I'd give her attention if she was talking to somebody else. I decided, even though she didn't like me, that, I was gonna still like her back, and I just kept working on it and working on it, and I remember going out of my way to really be friendly to this person, and eventually I felt like she was being a little friendly back, and I drove home, thinking, "God, I've had a healing." And the very next day, I came into work with the book by Dr. Ian Stevenson called
mm,
20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation. And when I set that book down, she looked at me and she said, and I quote, "Why are you reading that trash?" And
mm,
I took my little friendship slide and I ripped it to bits in my head, and everything else she ever said to me came to mind. And then about 3 minutes later, she started talking to me normally again. And I thought, she doesn't realize how that hurt my feelings.
mm,
And I forgave her, and I forgave myself for reacting, and I
mm,
just kept working with it. And we became friends to such an extent that when we'd go to lunch as a group in the accounting department, she'd save a chair next to her because she had a story she wanted to tell me. And I transformed that relationship just by trying to get energy to it. And I think you can do that with any relationship,
mm,
because people are there to help us become better people. We have the opportunity to become a better person by having all the people around us that have come our way.
mm. Wow, remarkable. It's, almost like the living embodiment of that Dr. King quote, like only darkness cannot drive out darkness, hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. And by embodying love and tapping into it, you're able to see that dynamic.
Yeah.
It didn't happen overnight, but you
And,
were able
when
to
when you
eventually.
get challenged by it, you take a big step back and think, "Why even bother? This person's a pain in the neck," but, you keep going, yeah. Because God loves us all equally. God's no respecter of persons. And I sometimes used to joke, "Well, that's because God doesn't have to work with this person." For whatever the reason, God loves us all very much the same.
Hmm. Wow. That's what I love about hearing your stories and the work that you're doing is this isn't you're just reading in a book. It's spirituality, practicality. You've been able to really embody and apply a lot of the teachings and have seen a shift in your life. It's amazing.
Well, the Casey information is so, applicable, so practical, so applicable.
Yeah.
Uh even down to past lives, even down to working with past life information. I remember my son's in college now, he's grown, but when he was about 1, uh, we had my wife and I, we had a crib for him that had really tall bars,
Mhm,
and he was on the 2nd floor, and we'd go down to the, kitchen, and we'd be talking and playing cards or watching TV, and about a dozen different times, uh, we'd hear this crash and a baby start crying, and he had pulled himself out over the bars and thrown
mm,
himself down and was hit the floor. And
mhm,
we'd run up, and after about the 12th time, I said, "He could break his neck. We gotta do something." And my wife's fairly intuitive, and she said, "Okay, you take him and see if, we can figure out what's going on." So I took him, and she sat there for about 20 minutes, and she came back, and she's, "I got this image. I don't know if it's true, but this is what I got." I said, "What is it?" She said, "I got the fact that it was an incarnation in France, and he was out working in the field, and the sheriff came by in one of those carts that had this bars all around, wooden bars that they used to pull
mhm,
with a horse, to pick him up and arrested him for something he did not do.
Hmm.
And every time he's waking himself up, he's seeing himself in that bar and he's thinking, I got to get out. I got to pull himself out. So I thought, well, I'll make it into a daybed. And I took all those bars off the thing and it was just a mattress. He never, ever, ever
Wow.
threw himself out again. So even if that was just imagination, okay, that worked. But what was, and we never told him. Amazingly, we go to kindergarten for the first day and we have this kind of like a uh, orientation. And
Mhm.
there's maybe 7 little kids with the teacher and all the parents that are there sit around. And the teacher has this like a race car track on the wall, and every student has a name on the car. And she tells them, if you're well behaved during the day, we'll move your little car around this racetrack. And if you get to the very end, you get a piece of candy at the end of the day. If you misbehave, we will take your car off the track and put it in the shop. And I turned to my wife quietly and I said, I wouldn't care if my car was in the shop. I mean, I was a little more rebellious than that. But my son was listening and we walked out and he was horrified. I mean, he was scared to death and he kept saying, what if someone else does something and I get blamed for it? What if someone else does something and I get blamed for it? And he was terrified. And I remembered, that
Hmm.
whole thing about, him being arrested for something he did not do, and we worked through it with him. But, it is amazing how we take these memories with us, and if we have just a little bit of insight, we can transform them when they need to be transformed or tap into our talent from the past when we're ready to use them.
Well, it's I think it was it Nietzsche or Viktor Frankl who said if you know the why, you can know the how and the what. So like figuring out the origins. I don't think we're insane beings, most of us. We're very logical and practical in many ways. And if we're responding in such an extreme way, there's usually some rooted pathology behind our expression, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So
Yeah, but amazing that you were able to, thank God, have intuition and are able to really kinda navigate your child's, care, because they do carry over not just gifts, as you mentioned, but also a lot of the traumas, and there
oh,
was a
yeah.
lot of healing. Yeah.
And Casey recommended, if you have a child who gets night terrors or who has a challenge they can't overcome, that to work with pre-sleep suggestion. That as they're going to sleep, to tell them gently and softly, you're with your mommy and daddy now. You're going to be okay. You don't need to worry. We're here to protect you. We're here to help you.
Mm,
And that suggestion can help to eliminate a lot of those child issues, problems that we carry over from the past.
mm, yeah, making a lot of the subconscious stuff a lot more conscious and working with the 2. I'm curious, Kevin, I know you mentioned you spoke through several different continents. I think you've been able to speak in Japan countless times and went to
I've
Asia,
spoken on every continent except
everywhere.
Antarctica. No penguin wants to hear what I have to say. But
Yeah.
everywhere else.
So and it, like, all started with just simple, innocent book that you picked up, but I'm curious if there's anything before that book, 'cause there's billions of people on the planet. Have you ever kinda sat with, "What's my connection to Casey?" There has to be like, something to it as to why I have such a big role in his teachings and his work. I don't know if that's something from a past life or
Sure.
something that you feel connection to
Yeah.
this day as maybe a guide of yours, but
Well,
I'm just kinda
absolutely.
curious. Yeah.
I mentioned that he had been a desert nomad in ancient Persia,
Yeah.
and he had had near-death experience, and that he came back and he had a healing. And after that healing, he decided to start a city that would focus on outreach to the surrounding cities, that would be a place of healing where people could come from all over. And it was called it's called in the readings, "A City in the Hills and the Plains," and it became a hub on a caravan route where people from all kinds of cultures came together for wisdom of the spiritual world, to have a healing, to trade, and everything went on in this place. And when I was writing a story about this ancient city in Persia, when Casey's name had been Yult, according to his readings, I had this experience where I saw myself sitting on the desert sand, and I was like one of the city's dream interpreters. And people would come up and they'd tell me their dreams. That was a job. They would tell me their dreams, and I saw somebody pay me. And as soon as I was like, wow, this has to be a past life. I have interpreted literally thousands of dreams. No one has given me a nickel. And then this one insight, I saw this was a job you used to get paid for. So I feel like I was like one of the main dream interpreters for Casey's City in the Hills and the Plains, when he had been Yoel, and I think that's our original connection.
Wow, wow. But it wasn't lateral that this was pro bono that you were doing in this lifetime, it was a continuation
It's
of
a
it.
continuation of the talent that people no longer pay for, so
Yeah, yeah, and you weren't Joseph from the Bible working with,
no, no,
Pharaoh, right?
I was not Joseph from
Yeah.
the Bible, no.
Yeah, wow, well, yeah, that had to make sense because when you think about it, for you to have this connection to Casey in such a strong way, there has to be something more than just this body, this lifetime that connects you to
Yeah.
him, you know, so
Yeah,
yeah.
the material I mean, for something to have my engagement and my enthusiasm and my continued to wanna
Mhm.
explore more for, 5 decades, there's really is that connection.
No, and obviously you're very intuitive. I know your spouse is as well, but just out of personal curiosity, do you ever feel Casey around you, whether it's writing your books or doing your lectures? Do you feel that I'm just curious as to
Mhm.
where his whereabouts are. I know there's a lot of people who think he's gonna reincarnate somewhere like in the Midwest. I don't, I don't know, but I'm just curious your kind of feeling on your
I have definitely had
out,
dreams about I have definitely had dreams about Edgar Cayce, and I have definitely had dreams about his eldest son, Hugh Lynn Cayce, who has
right?
been a source of amazing dream inspiration on a number of occasions. But I have not had the experience where I'm in a room and all at once I think, "Oh my god, Edgar Cayce's here." But I've
Mm,
definitely felt his presence in dreams and things.
yeah.
And, I would say that my waking, psychic impressions has generally been a woman's voice. I'm guessing it might be my higher self, maybe an angel, and I usually hear it in this ear, left ear. And like just one example, I was uh, I was in. My wife and I had been together for 33 years. Before that, I was married for 5 years, and I was married to a woman who had two older children. And the 10-year-old just hated me for whatever reason. I don't know why. Her father told her I didn't. She didn't need to do anything I'd say, and she was just. I mean, she would do things like I'd be in my office trying to write something, and she would take her shoe and throw it against the door over and over and over. And I'd open the door. I said, "Please don't do that. Do you want me to play?" You want? And she, "No, I don't have to do anything." And she just throw it. Oh, I mean, it was just constant. And
Right.
my wife and I come home from work, and this child, young, her mother would say, "Please turn that radio down." And this
Mm,
10-year-old would tell her mother, "Why don't you go F your?"
mm,
And
damn.
my wife didn't believe in any kind of discipline to a child or
Right. Wow.
so, it was incredible, and I remember one day going out to the driveway, I'd had one of those days like the shoe or whatever,
Right.
and I said to myself alive, "Oh my god, what am I supposed to be learning from this?"
Mm,
And the woman's voice said, as clear as I can hear your voice, she said, "How to have control of yourself
mm,
when you have no control over a situation." And I got inspired, I thought, "My god, what a great way to learn that lesson." 'Cause, I can control how I'm reacting even if I can't control what's going on, and that was such an aha moment,
wow.
and I've heard that voice on a number of occasions. Half a
Yeah.
dozen maybe, yeah.
Wow. That's a big message in AA meetings for sure,
Mhm,
knowing the controls, the things you can't control, the wisdom and difference between the 2. Yeah,
mhm,
that's a beautiful lesson. Yeah, it seems like you're able to really understand that is life happening to me or for me, and
yeah.
there's a spiritual reason and solution for everything that we're going through, and that's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to I'd like to tell you one of my stories about, getting guidance from God, that I think that's an interesting story. One of the things I remember reading it the first time, a, woman in her 60s who had been through a divorce, she had a job, she was living in DC, and her question was, "How can I, at my age, learn what is mine to do just now?" And Casey gave her advice that he suggested could apply for anyone. That each morning when you woke up to get quiet, close your eyes and just quietly pray, God, what would you have me do today?
Mm,
God, what would you have me do today? God, what would you have me do today? Say it 3 times and then just get quiet and get it listening. And I have done that over and over and over again. My favorite example is this. I did that one morning and I got the sense that somebody was going to need my help financially.
mm,
And the first thing that came to and that was my intuitive sense. Then my logical mind kicked in. I thought, well, the place I usually see people who need money are right when you get off the interstate to go where A.R.E is. There's a road called Bird Neck and then go up. And sometimes people will be standing there with a sign, they want money. or the 7-Eleven that's near A.R.E. I sometimes stop for coffee. There'd be someone sitting there, and they would need money for whatever. So I thought, okay, well, I'll be ready. So I took $20 out of my wallet and I put it in my pocket to be ready for this. Drive off the interstate, nothing. Go to the 7-Eleven for coffee, nothing. Forgot all about it. I go to work. This happened to be Christmas week, and we have this. Well, we've had it for like 20 years. This kind of family routine where we go to a pretty expensive Italian restaurant for Christmas Eve dinner. So during lunch, I went down to the bank and I wrote a check for $200 so I could buy dinner because it's
Mhm.
pricey. And I'm just getting my envelope from the teller, and two things over, a young man, maybe in his 20s, walks up to the teller, and the teller says, "How are you doing today?" And she says, no, she says, "How are you doing today?" And he says, "I don't know what I'm gonna do. I can't pay the rent this week."
Mm.
And I hear that and I thought, is this the person I'm supposed to help? So just be kind of sure, my left brain kicks in again. I said, God, I need a clear sign. Is this the person I'm supposed to help? And as soon as I turn with my envelope with the $200 in it, he looks right at me. He says, repeats himself, I don't know what I'm going to do this week. I can't pay the rent.
Mm.
And I didn't need a clearer sign than that. So I kind of slowed myself up and I followed him out to the parking lot and I gave him my envelope and I said, I think this is for you. And then I left before he could see how much was in it or anything. But I truly believe, then I had to charge the damn dinner. But no, I truly believe that if you ask to be shown what you need to do,
Mhm.
the universe will show you the way. It's just an amazing, and it's kind of fun working for God. Every once in a while, you get inspired by what you were able to do, even if people don't find out about it.
Yeah, we were hired long ago by, the CEO with, not an expired contract, and, from one CEO to another former CEO with the A.R.E, yeah, it's, you're doing God's work and certainly a brothers and sisters keeper, remarkable. I would say it's virtually impossible to cover all of your teachings and all of Casey's teachings in one conversation. We'll definitely have to have you back, Kevin, because there's just so many stories and so much wisdom. But I've just wanted to check in with you. Is there one thing that is kind of coming to you intuitively to share before this wonderful conversation and just really a big support to the channel by introducing Casey and as well as yourself?
Sure.
Loved every word, but is there something that's coming to you at this time that maybe Casey spoke to or the world needs to hear? Because as you said before, he's just so ahead of his times, and now especially, I'm sure there wasn't something that evaded his, channelings in many ways?
So let me give it in two parts. One, in terms of your connection to the Creator,
Mhm,
regardless of who you are loved. And you only have to give God a chance. Just open up a little bit, and God will reach out and meet you more than halfway in whatever way you need help and assistance.
mhm,
In terms of Casey, lots of times people say, well, you have so many books. So can you only pick one? If somebody was interested in my concept of everything Edgar Cayce had to say about why we're here and what we're supposed to be doing and the spiritual material and the Cayce material, what book would I recommend? If I could only say one book with that in mind, I would keep Edgar Cayce on Mastering Your Spiritual Growth. I think that book is an encapsulation of everything I've learned over the years with the Cayce insights. And it truly, I think, has helped a lot of people.
and that could be found, I guess, in your
At
website or
Amazon.
Amazon? Okay.
Amazon, or people go to my website, kevintodeschi.com, and you can get links to all my various books.
Emphasize on the com and the .com, right?
That's
Yes.
right.
Well, Kevin, I know you mentioned you're gonna be in the Dale, Lily Dale in a couple weeks, so I'm sure this
And
interview
I'll
will
be in
come out right
Boston.
before
I'll
then.
be in Boston in September, and, I just
Cool.
travel around. Do Zoom talks monthly online, so
A lot of things coming down the pipeline. Well, Kevin, I couldn't thank you enough for your generous time and really introducing Casey to our community. And whenever you're around, please let me know. Would love to have you back on. But I encourage all my viewers to check out Kevin's books, his upcoming workshops, and visit his website, which will be included in this description. So, Kevin Todeschi, an honor to have you here, and love every word that you had to say today.
Jacob, thanks for having me. Great seeing you again.
You're a special man, you're a special soul, and I'm just lucky to cross paths with you.
Me
God
too.
bless.
God
Thank
bless.
you. Well, that was a wonderful conversation. I learned so much about Kevin's life, about Edgar Cayce, and I hope you were able to also take in a lot of the teachings that are very much ahead of its times from the channeled readings that Casey gave throughout his lifetime. And so I hope you really enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. And certainly, please consider following the works of Kevin's and his upcoming events, checking out his books as well. Would really recommend that. And keep on, joining us here on the podcast where we're going to continue to ascend. We'll bring a lot of people from a lot of different pockets of spirituality and wellness and mental health. There's always something fascinating, interesting, and hopefully something that you could take with you on your journeys. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you here next time on the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder.